everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unfinished Business. Tonight, our panelists are first, we have Tim Butler, 2016 and 2020 Bernie Sanders delegate, and Danielle Prokopchak, who is a 2016-2020 Bernie Sanders supporter, mom, and Democratic Committeewoman. As we all know, the Democrat Party had their convention last week. And the Democrats is a diverse group of individuals. Although we often agree on the problem areas, we have many different ways to solve them. So one of the main questions we want to talk about tonight is, did the Democratic Convention last week do enough to accomplish one of its main goals, which is to unite the Democrat Party to defeat Donald Trump on November 3rd? And then, of course, we want to talk about what is the direction of the Democrat Party moving forward. So let's start with that. So Danielle, what do you think? As a Bernie supporter, do you think the convention did enough to unite Democrats?
So I'll start by saying that I am voting for Joe Biden. I think it's maybe important just to establish that I'm very passionate Bernie supporter 2 times over now and a super volunteer. But I am planning to vote for Joe Biden. I can't say the enthusiasm is the level it would be if it were Bernie as our nominee, but I did tune into the convention. And I was a little disappointed, I will say, in the strategy of, I would say, kind of tailoring the message and the platform and the speakers to a more moderate, conservative voter base. I think we learned in 2016, and at least the polls that we're looking at now, as far as conservative and Republican support for Joe Biden, it's just not there. I think the DNC should have done a little bit more to include the progressive voice and advocates and candidates to kind of talk to us and tell us their message and the platform and what they plan to do. So I wasn't seeing a lot of that. Whether I can say that's going to persuade voters to vote for Joe Biden or not vote for Joe Biden, I don't know that. But I do think there was a lot less from the people at the DNC.
Great. Just to remind everyone, we are taping live. So please join the discussion. Please send us a comment. Please send us your questions in the comment box below. So what about you, Tim? I was a Joe Biden delegate. You were a Bernie Sanders delegate. What do you think about the convention? Do you think it did enough?
No, and I agree with Danielle that, Biden didn't get that much support nationally. If you look at the amount of donors he actually got contributions from, he only led in Delaware and parts around Washington, D.C. Bernie wipes the floor. I mean, with the amount of donations in the primary, I think Biden was only at 256,000 individual donations, and Bernie Sanders got 746,000 donations, with all the media pressure, blackout, all these other candidates dropping off left and right around Super Tuesday just to go endorse Biden for a reason that I do not understand, why they think a very conservative Democrat like Joe Biden can be a populist candidate to defeat Donald Trump and have the rallies and enthusiasm. The enthusiasm was behind Bernie 100% for the last 4 or 5 years. It's been obvious. I just don't understand why the Democrats are doing that to themselves. And I also feel like Joe Biden has been predicted through FDR in a lot of ways. He wrote a letter to the convention, and nothing's different than from when FDR was elected president.
But is it the party or is it the voters? I mean, you brought up a good point. We had a very diverse group of primary candidates in the very beginning. We had at least 20, if not more, candidates, different ages, different races, different political philosophies. I mean, we really had a choice, and the voters chose Joe Biden. I mean, so is it really the party to blame? And we'll go back to Danielle on this one. Or is it the voters? Do we need to accept what the voters chose? Now, with that said, we live in Pennsylvania, so, we didn't really have a choice. I firmly believe that we need to shake up the whole way we start voting with the early states. But for now, this is the process, and this is what Democratic voters chose.
I mean, I don't hear anything from Joe Biden about a job guarantee, Medicare for all, education expansion so that we have lifelong free education, expanding Social Security so our seniors aren't in poverty, having clean energy. I don't think Joe Biden really thinks the climate crisis is as big as it is. Well, guess what? It's not me saying, it's not the scientists saying. The Pentagon even says that climate change is a threat to our national security, and I'm not hearing any of that from Joe Biden. And Kamala Harris even stepped it back on Medicare for All when she was a co-sponsor of that bill. She was now saying affordable and accessible healthcare for all, which I don't buy. I don't like it when politicians say we need access to affordable healthcare. Like, to me, like that, access doesn't mean anything if you can't afford it.
Well, but we have this comment from Laura. Biden wasn't even coming in fourth in the primaries before Super Tuesday. It was neck and neck between Bernie and Pete. So, Danielle, that is true. With that said, this is the delegate race, not the number of states you win. So
Right.
Is this, the Democrat voters chose Joe Biden. We had this policy debate, and that's who they chose.
Right. So here's what I'll say. Number one, it's frustrating that our state didn't even get to really have a say in the primary. What frustrates me the most about the Democrats as a whole is the fact that Bernie was winning the early stage primaries, like Tim said. The energy was there, the enthusiasm was there, the votes were there, the money was there. And then apparently there was this behind the scenes call from President Barack Obama to consolidate support behind Joe Biden. Candidates were called specifically and asked to drop out and to put all their support behind him. I honestly don't think, had that happened, Bernie would have lost. I think when you have 7 candidates, and I'm just estimating here, drop out basically in the same week and say that they endorse Joe Biden, even Elizabeth Warren, which is so frustrating and disappointing, you can't lose. I mean, when you have one person running against 8 candidates with money and connections, that candidate was chosen for us. And that's kind of how I feel, is that, the voter turnout was disappointing. I think, Bernie should have won more states. I think the enthusiasm was there, but it wasn't matched by the turnout in the primary. And that is something we need to talk about later in the program, probably. But I think the DNC and the Democrats as a whole, rallying behind Joe Biden, made that choice for us. And that's pretty frustrating.
But what about the voters? And I'll go back to Tim then. For argument's sake, the candidates dropped out. You had Mayor Pete. You had a lot of candidates, Cory Booker, a lot of candidates to lead. Former Secretary Julian Castro. We had 20 candidates. But for argument's sake, say I take your argument that the DNC got involved and rallied behind Joe Biden. The voters still, when we got to South Carolina and then we went to Super Tuesday, they still got behind Joe Biden. The DNC didn't go around bullying all of the voters. So
what I don't understand is, how does someone like Andrew Yang benefit from endorsing Joe Biden? What does he personally or professionally, because he's so much different than the regular long-term career politician like someone like Joe Biden arguably is. So it's what is he gaining from it? What is someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who endorsed Bernie last time, getting out of it? I don't understand those questions, and I don't understand why Bernie dropped so early versus last time.
Well, you'll have to ask them that question. But for argument's sake, maybe they're looking at the whole picture. Because again, Bernie's not the only candidate that had supporters. There was Elizabeth Warren. There are a lot of candidates that had bases of voters who went to support them. So I don't want to turn this into a Bernie versus Joe Biden.
But I mean, Tulsi got at least 3 delegates. She wasn't allowed at the convention, but John Kasich was. I mean, and AOC was not allowed there. Bernie had to invite her there.
That is a valid discussion. So let's kind of move the discussion a little bit with the convention. There are a lot of Democrats who feel that the party tried too hard to appeal to Republican and moderate voters. So that is a valid discussion that you have there. Do you think that the party should focus more on progressives? Do you feel as though progressives weren't there enough? Well, let me ask you this. What did you think of Bernie Sanders' speech? To me, when I heard him, he spoke of unity. I feel as though he encouraged his supporters to unite behind Joe Biden so that his platform or his policy positions don't completely die away. I mean, you have to admit, you have a better shot at getting your policies through a Biden administration than a Trump administration.
Well, I voted for Hillary last time. I'm sorry, go ahead, Danielle.
I'll just say I thought his speech was what we needed right now. I think Bernie did what he needed to do in 2016. I think he got behind Hillary, as was asked of him, and I would say the majority of us voted for her. So I think he dialed it up a little bit because Trump is Trump, and that's where we need to be right now. And I thought his speech was compelling. But I do think that there was a missed mark with including progressives. And I think what frustrates me is, like, if you look at our state here in Pennsylvania, we have candidates like Nikhil Saval and Shannon Danielson and Liz Fiedler, Sarah Innamorato, Summer. These people are true progressive contenders with a voice and a movement. And that's serious and that's real, and they're winning is the big thing. Like, we need to take these progressive voices seriously and give them a platform, especially at places like the DNC. And I do think the mark was missed there. I appreciate Bernie's sentiment. I'm glad he invited AOC. I think some people, put a lot of stock in her and her words. I think it was important to hear from her. But specifically, the DNC, I thought, did a great job given the constraints with coronavirus. I thought it was a very moving message. I think the human side of it came through really nicely. But that progressive excitement and enthusiasm seemed to be lacking, in my opinion.
Tim, what did you think of Bernie's speech?
Well, it's not just like that one speech, but I think the task forces weren't as progressive as we even thought. We didn't even get like one piece of legislation out of it. I mean, we could have settled, like, Bernie was the compromise between like the people that wanted Al Gore and Dennis Kucinich, and I guess you would argue progressives and leftists that aren't in the DNC anymore. They've adopted Republicans instead. So it's like, where are the people from 2000 to 2010, right before Obama, and when they were going? I just felt like there was nothing that came out of it, and they didn't let Nina Turner, as an example, be a part of it. And they just denied us. I mean, we could have settled for Medicare for all, which in Canada, Medicare for all is implied it's for everybody. So we have this false implication that we're not being a part of the rest of the world, because you define Medicare in Canada, it's already implied for all. So like the United States, we could adopt that, and we decide not to for corporate greed.
So as you know, that Bernie was involved with putting the platform together, with drafting the platform. So some of his policy ideas, not all, obviously, when you bring up Medicare for all, as we all know, Joe Biden is for the public option instead. That is one policy difference. But he did incorporate some of Bernie's ideas. When we talk about climate change, when you talk about even student loans for students, he did include some of that. Are you just saying it's not going far enough?
Well, under Obama's administration, we did allow Arctic drilling. And right now, your bankruptcy, you can't claim bankruptcy with student loans. Like, that's not part of it because of neoliberal policies in the 90s that I've really felt shifted the Democratic Party to the right. I mean,
Danny, what do you think about the platform? I mean, Bernie did have a say in it. And, politics, a lot is about compromise. I used to write policy myself, so I know from experience, you don't always get everything you want. You do have to compromise.
Right.
We always want change right away, and there are some things we do need change right away. We look what's going on now with communities of color and the police. Those types of changes should happen now, not gradually. So right. I understand the urgency of now. But again, the voters did speak. Alas, are either of you claiming that DNC got involved this year like they did in 2016? Do you not accept the results of the primary? Because I know that was an issue 4 years ago.
I would say I accept the results of the primary. I do still struggle with the fact that there was obviously a concerted effort to consolidate the major players toward the end. And you mentioned South Carolina before, and I think that happened obviously at a very strategic time in a state where Joe Biden was expected to do well anyway. So yeah, I mean, I struggle with that, but I think, many of us have come to terms with where we're at right now, and just the seriousness of the Trump administration facing another 4 years is just not something we can tolerate. Could I turn back time and do things differently? I would prefer that, yes. So I'm not going to say like was there voter suppression or fraud again, But I do think the candidate consolidation was frustrating. I do think perhaps Elizabeth Warren was promised the VP slot, and that didn't work out. So, like, where are we as progressives if we're going to sell out and then we're not getting what we thought we were going to get anyway?
And you're probably right. I wouldn't be surprised if those candidates got phone calls asking them to step back. Maybe they have a cabinet position in the future. Maybe they'll help them in another race in the future. But the Sanders campaign did go through this before. And whether or not you like Barack Obama's policies when he was president, you have to respect the fact that he beat not only the party and the Clinton machine when he first ran for office. I mean, everyone loves him now, but he had to work for that. Yep. Everyone was against him, including the unions in the very beginning. So is it just that the Sanders campaign just didn't outsmart the machine this time?
Well, I think what is frustrating about the consolidation aspect is that we did this in 2016. So why would we not try something different this time? So I understand that you see Trump as the biggest threat to democracy, and that's true. And I understand that all of those candidates and the machine behind them realize that we must do everything possible to ensure that Trump doesn't win again. But we took the conservative road, and it didn't work out. And we can talk about why that happened. But with the enthusiasm with the progressive movement, I just don't understand why we wouldn't try something different this time, given how well Bernie did early on in the primaries.
Here's a comment from Cole. He mentions that he doesn't believe Biden is perfect by any means. However, Trump is waging war on all communities of color in the country. So he's basically saying, and I'm sure you've both heard this argument, he's not perfect, but he's not Trump. We have a better shot of getting more progressive policies through with a Biden administration. Now, Tim, I see you reject this argument on Facebook all the time. Would you like to explain why?
Well, I think that we're really electing Kamala Harris, honestly, because if she's vice president, Joe Biden's getting up there in age. That was a huge argument with Bernie about his age. And guy pulls 16-hour days and runs his interns into the ground. But I feel that really Kamala Harris is going to be the successor. So are we going to have 12 years of neoliberal policies? I don't know. We're in a bad situation right now. And it's because I feel that the DNC establishment would rather lose to Republicans than win with FDR Bernie. I don't know why they've been doing it. And they've proven to me time and time again that they'd rather have that. Because in 2016, Trump's own team said Bernie would beat him, not Hillary Clinton. So I feel the same thing with Joe Biden this time, that they're welcoming Joe Biden. I mean, prove me wrong.
Well, Danny, a lot of progressive candidates are actually winning in primaries across the country. So depending on what happens in November, you're going to see a lot more progressive people in Congress. I'm a firm believer it's not just about the presidency. Regardless of who wins the president, I really want the Democrats also to take the Senate. I believe we need to keep the House, take the Senate, and if we have the presidency as well, then we can actually try to lobby for some real change. But if Joe Biden wins and Mitch McConnell is still the Senate Majority Leader, regardless of where you fall on that political spectrum, unfortunately, nothing's going to happen. But you do see a lot more progressives winning primaries throughout the states. Do you feel the party is, even if it's slowly, moving in a more left position, progressive position? Danny?
Yeah, I do. I think it's inevitable. Like you mentioned early on in the program, it may not happen as fast as we would like it to. I think it's happening. I think what needs to happen is that more progressives need to continue to run for office. We need to support those candidates. Like you said, again, early on with the presidential primary, we saw some fallout with the primary participation in voting. We need to get people to the polls. We can talk all day on these programs. We can be active on social media, but we need to vote, and progressives need to turn out. And I think part of that is, again, having a candidate that you believe in, you align with, that you see yourself in. And I think the more people running for office, the easier that becomes. But I do think that's the direction we're going, absolutely. And that's part of the reason why I wanted Bernie so badly for our country this time, is that we could have had that. We were so close having just common sense things like Medicare for all, like a healthcare guarantee for every person in this country is not radical. That's just what most other countries have. It's the common sense and humane thing to offer. A Green New Deal, again, it's not radical when you read it. It just makes sense. Why are we not protecting our environment for our kids and future generations? Like, these things to me are not radical. I don't think they're radical to a lot of young folks running for office, and I'm pretty encouraged by that.
Well, Tim, as you know, I'm sure you're aware, the Republican Party doesn't even have a platform this year. They're just pledging
No.
their allegiance to Donald Trump. But doesn't that concern you? I mean, imagine.
So if I'm not mistaken, the Republican Party in 1956, my add you just to remind everybody how far right both parties have become, provide federal assistance to low-income communities. Wow, sounds kind of socialist. Protect Social Security, also provide asylum for refugees. I wonder what candidate this time around had that policy. Extend minimum wage. Oh, that who's that? Strengthen labor laws and unions. Wow, was Biden going around unions or was that Bernie? Improves unemployment benefits and assure equal pay for equal work regardless of sex. That was the 1956 Republican platform. Like, where's the scientific method? Here's the thing: the scientific community is outpacing the political structure by light years and miles. The political structure has to get together so that we can cure cancer, we can have safe, clean drinking water, people have roofs over their heads, we have kids in poverty that are no longer in poverty but now have an education, can read, be a part of their community. I just don't see like the political party doing that, and like that was the only thing about Bernie that was bringing people together. That's why he was able to sell out crowds, because he wasn't bought and paid for it. So it's like, how do we have that again? And with your point about progressives winning, all 4 members of the squad won their re-election, and Cori Bush won her election against, from my understanding, a corrupt lineage or dynasty in St. Louis. So it's like, yeah, people are looking towards the policies.
But if you notice, they're trying to change the party from within. I'm just trying to understand, how do you change the Democrat Party for if you feel it needs to be changed? And I'm not arguing it does not, but how do you change it if you're not involved, other than changing from within?
Well, I can't reward corruption. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say 2 things. First, one thing I'd like to get back to is like potentially talking about the abolishment of a 2-party system. I think the frustrations that came out of 2016 that we're seeing again, like that's something we should be talking about. You know, we can't change the outcome of this, so maybe we can talk about reform when it comes to the election process. But I do want to go back quickly to Cole Goodman's comment about Black and brown communities and safety, and why voting for Biden is so important this time. And that's, you know, part of my message today is I did not want Joe Biden as our nominee, but we have him, and he's done things like propose an assault weapons ban, which to me personally, as someone who volunteers for a gun violence prevention organization and has young kids in schools, is very, very important. But with what we're seeing in the world, with police brutality, it's just too dangerous to let Trump continue. And I think the one thing we can do right now is vote for Joe Biden while having these conversations about, how, like you said, to change the party within and the platform within. So, you know, if we want just going to talk about things that Joe is doing well, we can talk about that. But I want to take Cole's point into account that it's so important to people that don't look like me that we don't let Trump succeed for another 4 years.
But, you know, too, and we need to hold the Democrat Party accountable as well. I see a lot of elected officials at these Black Lives Matter rally, but there's no policies. They have no racial justice policies, and they're not promoting them in legislation. As a Black woman myself, that doesn't mean much. It's more about the action. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that change starts at the ballot box, but it doesn't end there. We have to keep our elected officials accountable. I also think when we're talking about racial justice, it's not just the police accountability and criminal justice reform. Let's talk about employment inequities. Let's talk about wage disparities. Let's talk about housing. Let's talk about educational. I'm sure both of you might have seen an article. Pennsylvania has one of the most racist school funding formulas among school districts in the entire state. So let's talk about those issues as well. I don't see either party really addressing those issues at all. So, when we talk about some of these issues, I don't see it as a political party issue. I see it as an American problem, an American issue. And that's why I try to encourage people to get involved in the process, not just speaking and going to marches and protests, which brings awareness to the issues. But we have to get people to the ballot boxes, and we have to get people to run for office. And that's why I brought up former President Obama again. Whether or not you agree with everything he did in office, he got elected. He beat the system. Now, it's hard to do that. I'm not saying it's easy at all, but it's the only way to get in those positions to make the change you want to see. And that's why I'm hoping, regardless of people's personal feelings about the election process, that they vote this November. Because can we all at least agree that we're not getting anything under another Trump administration? Nothing's going to change. If anything, it's going to get worse.
Exactly. Yep, you nailed it.
Do you agree with that at least, Tim?
Say that again?
I said, do you at least agree with the fact that regardless of where we believe on the political spectrum, that no change is going to happen, at least no good change is going to happen under another 4 years under Donald Trump? Do you at least agree with that?
Well, I agree with that. It's just, if I cheated you out of an election, why would you vote for me? I mean, I just don't understand this level of almost Stockholm syndrome. 110%. If somebody took an election from you and then says, oh, you got to vote for me because Trump is bad, he's the worst evil, you got to vote for the lesser evil here. I voted for Iraq and actually dropped bombs on people. He hasn't done that yet, but he's done some bad things, but I'm the lesser of the two evils. I just don't understand that argument at all, and that's what we've been faced with for the past 7 months.
So then you do think that Bernie was cheated out of the nomination then?
Oh yeah. Joe Biden couldn't fill a high school gym. I'm sorry. Enthusiasm and level of people coming out for him, willing to knock on doors. But Bernie had about 1 million people a day knocking on doors for him. I mean, it was crazy. All that phone calls and artwork. It's really in the artwork too. I haven't seen any enthusiasm for any political candidate before or since him.
But how was he cheated though? Do you think people stuffed ballot boxes? People voted that weren't supposed to?
I don't know why the Democratic Party allows ES&S and Dominion to run the new voting machines, but they're the same voting machines that were used in Sun County, Florida in the 2000 election. Okay, Democrats have also lost John Ossoff and Stacey Abrams to ES&S and Dominion voting machines. And I just feel like that's why the Republicans are so scared of mail-in ballots, because they can be audited and be transparent, and they're not connected to the internet. You can have a database where you can recount an election from years and years past. The Republicans don't want that whatsoever. So, I mean, that's where the Democrats are shooting themselves in the foot by using the election technology that's very much controlled by Republicans or influenced by them.
I haven't heard Bernie Sanders say anything. Now, he did complain about 2016, but I haven't heard him complain about the election process this time. In fact, there were changes because of 2016. He was able to get changes made, even with the elimination of superdelegates having as big of a say in the process.
Well, the superdelegates did get counted in the roll call. I mean, Biden didn't win California or Iowa.
On the second count, the first count is the elected delegates on the roll count. That's my understanding. That was one of the changes that were made, at least with DNC members from the state. But we don't have much time left. I kind of want to talk about where we kind of go from here. Because as I said in the beginning, I think we agree on the problem issue areas. The question is just, how do we solve them? How do we get to that solution? And that's going to be a debate, obviously, that will continue. But where do we go from here as a Democrat Party? Because we do have diverse ideas and opinions within it, but we have to find a way to unite if we're going to get anything accomplished to help people. I look at this. To me, this is bigger than any one person. I see elections bigger as any one person, but I'm about the policy more so than the individual person. It's sort of like sports to me. You root for the team, not necessarily one player. So that's kind of how I see this as well. But Danielle, where do you see the party moving from here? And, don't forget, if Joe Biden wins, there could be a leadership position for Bernie Sanders, which means he'd have even more influence.
I don't think so. I don't think Biden's going to invite Bernie to do anything. Sorry, not sorry. I don't think it's going to happen.
And that may be true. I think my response would be, like, we both work in government. We understand how it works. Like, there's a team of people behind a singular person. So I think, to me, the message for progressives moving forward that the Democrats can own is filling cabinet positions and staff with a diverse progressive slate of people. It might not be Joe Biden, the mouthpiece, but if there are people writing the policy and doing the communications and working with constituents, that's important. And I think right now, maybe that's what we can control. So maybe it's putting pressure on the people making the hiring decisions. It's a simple thing. I think we need to demand of the cabinet leaders. Kamala may not have everything in common with me on the incarceration and some of the prison reform stuff, but I do think it's so cool that we have a chance to elect our first Black and Indian American vice president. And I think small steps like that we can take to ensure that we are listening and we are hearing the progressive voices and we're going to make change matters a lot. But I think we need commitments, and we can't let up on the pressure. That's the only way anything changes in this country. There's activists and advocates that are just out there, and they're just not relentless. We just stay loud and we keep it place, and we're in every meeting, in every demonstration, on every board. We're running for every office up and down the ballot. That's the only way.
Right. People I don't mean you two specifically, but generally speaking, Americans complain about elected officials all the time. As we know, Congress has like a 2% approval rating. But then it amazes me that people get reelected every 2 years. There's an election every 6 months. And if you don't like what's going on, we can vote in new people. Tim, why don't you think people do that? And he froze right now, so I'll go to you, Danny. Why do you think people keep getting reelected?
I'm sorry, what was that? I'm hard of hearing.
What I was saying is it amazes me how Americans in general continue to complain about elected officials. But yet, as you know, once you're elected, it's very hard to get voted out. The same people keep getting voted out. So my main question is, why is that? Why do people complain but then keep voting in the same, even when there's choices? Again, neither one of you might like Joe Biden being chosen. We had 20 candidates. We had such a diverse group of candidates, but we did end up with former Vice President Joe Biden. Why is that? Why do people say they want change, but then when the voting comes, we get what we get? What do you think that's about?
One thing I'll say, maybe there's a great follow-up program on the Electoral College and the two-party system, because I do think that's a big factor. I think it's hard to beat the machine. I think every candidate that's run against an established incumbent can speak to that. And I think that's what Bernie ran up against this last time, especially in the South Carolina time frame. But I think getting involved in your local county party is that you're an amazing chairwoman for Dauphin County. I think having relationships with people on the ground who are establishing the get out the vote strategy and knocking doors and making calls and helping candidates get trained up is like the way we start from the ground up. Getting involved in advocacy groups that may not align with a candidate, but an overall message and mission helps. But I think, there's a major GOTV and turnout concern for Democrats across the country, and we see it here in Pennsylvania all the time. And I don't know how we overcome that, but it's something we have to focus on.
And change does start at the local level. And as both of you know, I mean, I'm the only Black county chair in the entire state with both parties. And we're the fifth largest state in the country. That needs to change. We need to be more inclusive on all levels. And, as you both know, I'm very involved with the Democrat Party, but I will call out if I see something is wrong. And that's one area that we do need to improve on. You have a compliment, Danny. Brittany says that agrees with you, that people have to show up every election, every level. And that's important. The voter turnout is horrible. And unfortunately, the people who need the most help are the ones that don't vote the most. And that's nationwide. That's not just here, of course.
Right. And take him as an example. He's probably the most progressive person I know in Dauphin County who got the most delegate votes. I mean, that's saying something. He's out there talking to people, and we believe in what he's saying, and his passion and his commitment to the cause matters.
Tim, do you have any comments on this part of the discussion?
Yeah, I'm trying to hear. I don't know why my video's cutting in and out, and your guys' audio's cutting in and out. What was the question?
We were talking about people getting involved on all levels, and Danny was saying how you're involved and got the highest delegate votes when you ran for delegate, if I heard that correctly.
The first time, and then this time I was technically not even supposed to be delegate. Nancy Hogan was supposed to be delegate. She was top vote getter. They just gave it to me because I'm a dude. Don't know why. It's this whole gender specificality in the DNC. So the basis of the Democratic Party's democracy, right? Well, it's not really democracy when they allow somebody else to go to convention for you or in place of you because of your gender. I mean, I think that's totally wrong. I don't know why that is, but it is. So I just kind of felt like it's not my place. I wasn't a vote-getter, so I think it's undemocratic.
Well, we're coming to the end of the show. I want to thank you both for joining us tonight. But, one last question in your closing remarks. I think you both pretty much agree that the convention last week wasn't completely inclusive of progressives. Do you both think that will affect the election this fall for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris? We'll start with you, Danielle. Then you can include your answer with your closing remarks.
Okay. I don't think it will overall affect the turnout and the vote count. I hope that there are pollsters and data scientists that are all over what needs to be done right now to win. I hope. I think it's disappointing, and it's a blow to an ego, and it's a really personal thing that's taking a while for me to reconcile personally as someone who considers herself to be very progressive and a Bernie supporter for a very long time. But I do think this election is different. Like we've talked about all the reasons why Trump just can't stay in office. He's a fascist. He's a racist. He doesn't care about families at the border. He doesn't care about gun violence. He incites violence in the streets. We just can't have it. So we may not agree on all the reasons why and how we got here and what we need to do after this election. But I think for the next 70 days, we just need to stay focused on making sure he's not a factor in our democracy in our country any longer. But I do think we need to start from ground zero when it comes to building a progressive platform in elections in this country, and especially in Pennsylvania.
Tim, your closing remarks.
So I'm not blaming anybody voting for Democrats, for Republicans, Libertarians, Greens, as long as you're voting, because there's about a third of the entire population that does not vote at all. So as I'm quoting a Hillary Clinton tweet from 2015, vote your conscience, because that's actually true.
Well, we have a comment from one of our district leaders, James Carter, who says, not only show up to vote, but stay actively involved. And I would like to end with that because, that's important. Change starts at the ballot box, but it doesn't end there. We have to stay involved, and we have to hold our elected officials accountable if we want to see the change that we want to see. But I would like to thank both of you for joining us tonight. I do hope that over the course of the next 74, 75 days, especially you, Tim, that you do vote for Joe Biden. I know, Danny, you said that you will support Joe Biden even if he wasn't your first choice. I am going to try to change your mind, Tim. I just hope that you...
I can't vote for someone that voted for Iraq. Period. I can't do it.
I just want you to try to look at let me put it this way. When we get to debates, the first debate is in September. Really look at the difference between these two men. And even though Joe Biden isn't perfect, and I will admit he's not perfect, but you have to just try to look at the full picture. And with the policy positions that you believe in, you have a better shot of pushing them through in a Biden-Harris. Besides, my last name's Harris. You have to vote for a ticket with Harris on it. That's like voting against me. Come on.
I don't think you put a lot of innocent people in prison for marijuana. So.
Right, but don't forget, Bernie also voted for that 1994 crimes bill. He voted for that bill as well.
Okay.
Are you talking about the crimes bill?
I can't hear.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't hear. It's okay.
That's okay. We have technical issues, but I would just encourage everyone to not just vote, but get actively involved. And I'd like to thank you both for joining the show tonight. And I hope you come back. I really want to keep this discussion going as we move forward to November 3rd.
All right.
So thank you very much. And for everyone else, you will be able to see the video afterwards. You can still send your comments and questions, and we can answer them even though our live broadcast is over. So thank you for joining us, and our next show will be next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Good night, everyone.